Greetings. This is Doc Ock coming to you live and direct from Black Facts Headquarters Central, right here in Kent, Ohio, the birthplace of Black History Month. So, we don't have a lot of time today. Not nearly as much as I would need to actually do justice to the topic, but we're going to do the best we can. So I've changed up on our topic just slightly in order to kind of move things forward a little bit here. But let's start off with our proverb for the day. The proverb for the day is, a man with too much ambition cannot sleep in peace. A man with too much ambition cannot sleep in peace. And that's a bagirmi. Proverb. That's a group of people in Central Africa, Central West Africa, around Lake Chad. So, not familiar with that group of people. I never heard of them before today, but that's one of their proverbs. A man with too much ambition cannot sleep in peace. And next up, we've got an original poem by Doc Ock, that being me. Let's see what I got here for you today. This one is talking about the Crusades. Now, I might have mentioned this before, that in school, most people only really study history in elementary and secondary school. We don't really get a lot of history in college. Now, I did end up taking a history course. Maybe that was because I needed to for my college credits. I'm not sure why I took that class, but I did take a few. But I can't recall if it was required or by choice. But for the most part, many of us do not really get any real history at all. What history we get is more myth than reality oftentimes. And the history of the Crusades is part of that history. So I'm going to read this little ditty I wrote a little while ago. Knights on a crusade. The knights were sent on crusade because the Pope hoped lives could be saved. With something to do and somewhere to go, he hoped they'd be less of a problem. But on the way there, they ran out of food. Left with no choice, they boiled children in oil. Tender and tasty, bite-sized morsels were they. They looted and pillaged every single village. No one was safe, neither Christian nor heathen. Finally, they reached the holy city at last, but after breaching the wall where they wailed, they proceeded to kill every man, woman, and child. The blood ran knee deep in the city of peace, since everyone they did meet now rests 6 feet deep. That was the end of the first crusade. Since then, many more have been made. It's a pity and a shame that most of them ended the same. And that might not be quite accurate. It might not have been the first crusade, but it's the first one that it's the one I can recall the best. When they went to go rescue Jerusalem from the heathens that were living down there, so-called, etc. Now, today's piece is going to rely on, it's more like a survey. And what I'm going to do is, this is all going to just be off the top, so I'm not going to read anything to you for today's story. So it's going to be a little unusual in that respect. But the subject is an African maritime culture. For the most part, we have no knowledge of any type of African maritime culture. As far as we know, the most Africans did was to go up and down rivers and dug out canoes and holler ooga booga and throw spears and poison darts and things of that nature. So for the most part, our knowledge of African maritime culture consists of what we saw on Tarzan movies, which, by the way, none of which were filmed in Africa or even anywhere near Africa. They were all filmed in South America, because that's where you have the biggest jungle, is South America. There are some areas of Africa with some jungle-like area. There's some jungle-like areas of Africa, but for the most part, the world's largest jungle is in South America. A lot of it's in the country of Brazil. So that's where a lot of that filming went on. But we still have these impressions in our heads. So what we're going to do is we're going to go black, way black in time. Now, we talked about Hannibal. We've been talking about Hannibal for the last 3 days, and we talked about his father last week as well on 2 days, Thursday and Friday. We talked about Hamilcar Barca, and then we talked about the son the first 3 days of this week. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to look at exactly where did this maritime culture come from, what did it consist of, and who was participating in it. As we talked about with Annabelle has been re-envisioned. Oh, I know. What's the word? Revisionist, right? People today, that's a catchword among historians, is that, oh, you're dealing with revisionist history. But if I have a story and somebody else edits my story, in other words, revises my story, and then my relatives years later go back to correct the revision of my story, does that also make them revisionist, or does that make the history of me as written by my family members, does that make their history or their story revisionist? I don't think so. To go back and correct something that was done incorrectly is not revisionist. That's called correction. That's what that's called. The word is correct. So all I'm trying to do is to get people to come correct. So the earliest documentation that we have doesn't exist in the form, it's not necessarily written down, but we do have a lot of documentation, and it's in the museums. You can see it in the museums in Boston, many of the large major museums all over the U.S. and throughout Europe, Berlin, the Berlin Museum being one of them, the museums in London being some more of them, and then, of course, the what is it called? The Louvre in Paris, France. So here we have depicted, and I'm going to move it up real close. You might not see me after a while here. I'm going to move this picture up real close. This is a picture of a model of an Egyptian boat. Now, if you notice, the color of the wood and the color of the people match. This is not based on revisionist history. I didn't set up this exhibit in the museum, and I don't think anybody black was involved in setting it up. So this is as an accurate portrayal of some Egyptians going down the river. Now, I'm not sure who they're taking down the river, but you can see the important person that's going down the river is under the covered part here. You can see they've got somebody back here by the tiller. Okay, that's the navigator or the captain of the ship. And I'm not sure what this person's role is here in the front, but I'm sure they have a very specific role. And you can see that they may be cruising down the Nile, or they may be cruising across the Red Sea. But I'm going to let all three cameras get a real close-up picture of that image of this boat. And these were very common boats. These models would be made and oftentimes put in the tombs of people that were buried or entombed in Egyptian culture. So we're talking 2,000-3,000 BCE. So 4 or 5,000 years ago. These are the types of items that were being buried with the Egyptians. Why did they bury these items? They put these items in the tomb with the person so that they would have everything they needed for the afterlife. So some things were real and they were mummified, like fruits and vegetables, things like that. Other things were they made models of, like this ship. But in some cases, like the case of a great pharaoh, the so-called model was the expanded version of the model. It was quite a bit larger. So this particular picture here is showing the solar barge of Pharaoh Khufu, right? There's the Great Pyramid of Khufu, and this is his part of his barge. I don't know if I have the picture here that shows the whole thing. I do have a picture like that, but I'm not sure if it's over here handy for me to pull up right now. I'm going to go over here and look in a minute. But here you can see this is the portion of the barge, just like of the ship, just like we saw on the previous selection, where the important personages could sit and be in the shade out of the sun. So you can see looks pretty large right here. And now this particular solar barge, as it's known, was taken apart. It was dismantled in pieces. Each piece was numbered. It had not numbered. It had codes for each piece to say this piece goes next to this piece, goes next to that piece, which allowed the people that rediscovered that dug up these pieces to be able to reconstruct this so-called solar barge and bring it back to life so we can see what did it actually look like. Oh, here goes a picture of the whole barge. You can see it right here. So there you have it. And you can see the kind of the cabin part I was just showing you the detail of way back here. You can see the ceiling of the building that they had to build around it. They had to build an entire building around it because this thing is at least 100 feet long. Okay, it's extremely large. It's a very large. Matter of fact, it's as big as the ship that the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. Those ships were each about 100 feet long. This ship is just as big as that one. It just has a very different shape. And you can see here, it's powered by people that would be rowing, the rowers, just like you saw in the previous picture. And you now have a good idea of what those rowers looked like. Okay? You have a good idea of what those rowers look like. So when you go to see this new movie that's just coming out on Cleopatra, I want you to look for these things and comment. Let me know, what do you see? Now, I'm going to show you one other detailed picture that I have. I see right here behind me. Here's also another detailed picture of the people. So again, you can see how dark all these people are. Now, they're all bald-headed, so we don't have any clues about their hair, but we talked about the hair previously and the symbol for Black Facts Educational Research Incorporated, how I created that symbol, that logo, in order to depict this whole idea that the Egyptian crowns were merely abstract representations of that the pharaohs wore back in the day. Now, so you saw those pictures there. Now, these large boats, or ships, as they could be called, or barges, however you want to describe them. The idea for them comes from much smaller vessels. Now, this one is not an accurate depiction. I thought I had another one over here, but I don't see it right now. Oh, nope, it's not back there either. Oh, I do have this here. Ah, there we go. I do have that one. I was wondering where I put that book at. Okay. I've got things squirreled away everywhere around here. This one here, these are pictures of Peruvian boats. And they're made out of a similar material. I believe they might even be made out of papyrus, but they're made out of these reeds, and they're bundled together in bundles. And you see here the person, it's like a kayak. And so the person slips in this part over here and has a paddle to be able to row with. I'm assuming they only have one paddle. Some of these paddles are just like kayaks, where there's a paddle on both ends. And so you can paddle with one side and then the other. And that's how you're able to easily control which direction your boat is moving in. And so these are boats in the area of South America around Lake Titicaca. Titicaca. Okay, Lake Titicaca. Don't ask me what that means because I don't know. And this one here is a larger version that we believe the Egyptians used back in the day. And we still find these kinds of boats being made and used on Lake Chad, which again is Central West Africa. That's the same area that our proverb for the day came from. And so you see, this is also made from a number of bundles of reeds. So they take the reeds and they tie them together in bundles and then tie the bundles together. And then they end up making a ship like this, a vessel like this, that could even go out on the open seas. And this is a picture here of Thor Heyerdahl in Ra 2. He had Ra 1, which was mildly successful, but didn't quite do what he wanted it to do. So he made another version of the boat, and he called it Ra 2, and he sailed all the way from West Africa to the Americas in a reed boat like this, much like the ones that are still being made on Lake Chad, still being made in Peru, and had been made in Egypt back in the day. This is how they made their boats. They make their boats quite differently now than they did then. But this is what Thor Heyerdahl did to prove that it could be done, that the Egyptians could have come to the Americas thousands of years even before Columbus. So this whole idea of a maritime culture is real. We talked about at the beginning of the week, we were talking about the maritime culture of the Carthaginians. And we were talking about Annabelle. And I showed you the pictures of some of the ships, the quadriremes and quintiremes that were made by them. Again, you see the same basic shape as you did except a larger, as you saw for the solar barge, where you have the front part comes to a point, the sides kind of bow out. They're making it out of wood, but originally, the original designs of these types of vessels were made using reeds, not as opposed to wood. Wood came later. Now, as I'm wrapping up here, because our time is about to end, this is that has been little spoken of, if spoken of at all, only in very hushed tones, and then only by. I've got a book here, one of the few books I've been able to find about to give some inkling of what was going on here, and it's called The Narrative of Robert Adams, a Barbary Captive. Now, I haven't had a chance to read through this book, but I'll read the back of it to you. First published in London in 1816, The Narrative of Robert Adams is an account of the adventures of Robert Adams, an African-American seaman who survives shipwreck, slavery, and brutal efforts to convert him to Islam before finally being ransomed to the British Council. In London, Adams is discovered by the Company of Merchants Trading to Africa, which publishes his story, including a fantastical account of a trip to Timbuktu. Adams' story is accompanied by contemporary essays and notes that place his experience in the context of European exploration of Africa at the time and weigh his credibility against other contemporary accounts. Professor Adams' preface examines Adams' credibility in light of modern knowledge of Africa and discusses the significance of his story in relation to the early 19th century interest in Timbuktu and to the literary genres of the slave narrative and the Barbary captivity narrative. So in other words, there were a number of these narratives written by people who were captured by what they call the Barbary Pirates. The Barbary Pirates operated on what was known as the Barbary Coast, and that is the whole north coast of Africa. So all the way from far West Africa in Morocco, all the way up to the Atlas Mountains that are right below the Iberian Peninsula, or right below Spain, Rock of Jebel Tariq, and then all the way across, going all the way across, maybe not quite to Egypt, but definitely Algeria, Tunisia, Libya. All of those countries made up, the Barbary Coast was in all of those countries. And the people were known as barbarians, which that word came from the word Berber. So today, being Ethiopian, one of the foods that I eat has berbere in it, which again comes from these same people, because they didn't just stretch all the way from Morocco to Libya. Those people stretched all the way over into Ethiopia. So that whole northern coast was peopled by the very same people, moving back and forth, roundabout on land and sea, not by air as far as I know, but definitely by land and sea. And so that's enough. That's our opening discussion on African maritime culture. Now, it's deeper than that. All I'm doing is just hitting some highlights and giving you some signposts to look for, as you might want to go back and do further research on that topic, African maritime culture. Little spoken of, but it's obvious that we had a maritime culture because we had gods. We still do. In the Yoruba religion, you have Yemanya, you have what is the other one? Oshun. You have Yemanya and Oshun. One of them is the goddess of the ocean. One is the goddess of the river. And so this whole idea of being connected with the water was a very important thing. If you think about the country of Nigeria with all those, and the Niger River going up and down, and then you think about, the Bight of Benin, the ocean being right there, the Atlantic Ocean, etc. Yes, we were out in it like a lot of other people were out in it, but we didn't necessarily have the same result where we went out and created all these colonies around the world. That's the real difference in the maritime culture of Africans, and even the Chinese, because they had a maritime culture that is little spoken of also. So what we're just trying to do, and it's spoken of, like the Carthaginians, it's well known that they had the strongest, most capable navy of any country at the time when they dominated over Rome, but it's spoken of separate from African history. It's been carved out. That whole piece of history, that whole area of northern Africa has been carved out and attached to the southern part of Eurasia to create this so-called Mediterranean culture. So when they talk about the Mediterranean culture, people don't automatically equate that with African culture. It's carved out and separated from African culture, but in all actuality, it was part and parcel of African culture. So I know I've gone way over my time today. I'm like really over. But you know what to do. You know who I am. I'm Doc Ock. It's noon, 12 o'clock high on a Thursday. This is Doc Ock at noon and 9, signing out, hoping everybody out there is going to be feeling real fine. We got a special coming up, a features group of a series of features coming up next month, dealing with Dr. Crosby and the development of Black studies into a discipline. We're gonna call that Who Is He and What Is He to You? And many voices. We're gonna include many voices speaking out on who Dr. Crosby is and what is he to them. Hopefully you'll be here to check them out. Look for it starting November 1st. That's this upcoming Sunday, because the 31st is Saturday. Sunday will be November 1st. And what day was that? All Saints Day. So we're gonna have some saints marching in. All right. So be here or live in fear for the rest of your life. I'm not gonna tell you to be there or be square because I don't know where there is. We want you to be here with no fear, so we can spread some cheer all through the rest of the year. Peace out, y'all.